And we should be live. Welcome everyone. I'm just gonna give it a minute until I can see that you are indeed in the chat. Welcome. We are live from Lambeth in London. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me properly. If anyone was completely new to me, if you don't know what you just clicked on, this is a live stream walked from London. You might be live with me, or you could be watching the replay in the next few weeks or months. If you are watching the replay, if you want to skip the hellos and go straight into the tour, feel free to skip the next 10 minutes. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. Hi Matthew. Thank you Tish, you can hear me well. And Linda is here, nice to have you here. Hello again Catherine, and welcome everyone. Now, if any of you were watching the replay in the next few months or weeks or... Am I going to see the Archbishop? We don't have any at the moment, Mark. I think he's quit. I think Mark is talking about the Archbishop of Canterbury. That's his official residence behind me, but I don't think we have any. I think he's quitted in, I think it was January. The new one should be appointed soon, but I don't think we have an Archbishop of Canterbury at the moment. I think the Archbishop of York has taken a bit of the duties on board. Hi Sandrine, welcome Genevieve. So yeah, if any of you are watching this on replay in the next few weeks or months, if you wonder what I'm reacting to, and if you want to see the chat, it is an option on YouTube. So if you are watching on the computer, at least on an iPad or telephone, I don't know, but it should be somewhere under the screen if you're watching on replay. Then you can see the chat as well. If you care to see what I'm reacting to. Usually I kind of try to repeat what's being said in the chat anyway. So even if you're watching without the chat, you shouldn't be too confused. Nice to see you here, Sandrine. Oh, that's interesting, Natasha. Sometimes the ghost can... I mean, some people claim that ghost can play with electricity sometimes on electrical equipment, so... Reverend Stephen Cottle is in charge. Yeah, so he's not been appointed, right? Yeah, I think. I mean, I didn't follow up lately, but I think the new one is going to be appointed soon. Hi Martin, nice to see you here. So we've got about, let me see, about 6 minutes before to start. Let me gracefully stand up because I'm actually sat here on the grass, so we've got to go down on the pavement. All right. And let me show you a glimpse of the view already in case you get bored of my face. So we'll flip this camera around. So we've got about 6 minutes. Let us know in the chat if you happen to be completely new to me. It's always nice to have a few new names. And if you're watching the replay and if you're wondering, how do I get to join those lives, to be able to interact in the chat and stuff, the best way is actually to subscribe and then to hit the notification bell. So you should get a little notification when I go live. So this is the official residence of the Archbishop of Canterbury. We'll talk about that in a moment. I don't want to say anything too interesting before it's officially time to start. Never bored of my face. Good to hear, Catherine. Thank you. So let's see how long we've got. 5 minutes to go. 5 minutes. And of course, you might have recognized the Houses of Parliament. And welcome everyone that just joined. We're just waiting for everyone to connect. We'll start at exactly 8:45 p.m. UK time. So as you can see, it's still bright, not for long, but that's quite cool to start with a bit of sunlight. Oh, thanks, Natasha. That's very nice of you. Sorry, I've got to be. It's always great to. It's always great to have some of your support. It's really thanks to your generosity that I can keep, creating new tours and keep doing those lives and all that. So thank you very much. And welcome, Lynn. Nice to see you here from Chicago. Our serial killer tonight has killed a few in Chicago as well. I'll tell you the story. So we've got, let's see, 3 minutes before it's officially time to start. And welcome, Carol Moon. Nice to see you here. Emily and Carol. Let's see what time it is. Oops. Sometimes I try not to frame people, but they are the one looking at the camera. There's a nice little cruise going through. It's probably one of those boats where they have a guide and maybe a bit of dinner or whatever it might be. That is Lambeth Bridge there. It is painted in red to go with the seats of the House of Lords, when the next bridge along Westminster Bridge is in green, as it is the colour of the House of Commons. They're doing a big amount of work on Lambeth Bridge at the moment. It was completely closed to the traffic today. I just hope they won't do the cycle lane on the same level as the pavement. I hate when they do that, because there's no point having a cycle lane if it's the same level as the pavement, because then you get all the pedestrians in the middle of the cycle lane. But we'll see. They've been doing some work for a while now. Oh, another lovely little cruise there. It is a Saturday night, so there's a lot of well, it's also peak season in terms of tourism, so you'll see a lot of cruises, I should say. Right, let's see what time it is. We've got 1 minute to go. 1 minute before it's officially time to start. And let's see, still 1 minute. Lots of flies around tonight. They might be attracted by the colors of my screen. That's probably why. Right, let's see. Oh no, still 1 minute. Or the best part of a minute. Ooh, I can hear Big Ben, so it must be 1:45. And it is indeed, see, perfect timing. Big Ben is one of the most precise clocks in the country, if not the most precise. I shouldn't call it Big Ben, though. I'm sure most of you know Big Ben is the name of the bell inside, not the clock tower. The clock tower is called the Elizabeth Tower. Anyway, let's flip this camera around and let's go. So for the ones that don't know me, I'm Natalie. I'll take you for a little live walk in Lambeth when we'll talk about a serial killer and much more. Now, tonight we're gonna talk about a Victorian killer and poisoner called Thomas Neil Crimm. But I wanted to start over here because, well, it's a lovely view. but also because I wanted to show you the proximity to the Houses of Parliament, to Scotland Yard. Down that way there, that's Scotland Yard. So if you were to compare to, for example, Jack the Ripper, that operated about 3 years earlier in the back streets of Whitechapel, in very secluded and dark streets, this killer here, if indeed it is a different killer, because some people claim he might have been Jack the Ripper as well. I doubt it, but we'll get to that. You know, comparing to Jack the Ripper, he was just meters away from Scotland Yard, you know, from all those places of power. And Cream was not originally from around here. Well, he was originally from Scotland, but he had immigrated to Canada very young, when he was about 4 years old, I think. They'd moved to Quebec, the city of Quebec. His dad was into the timber import and export. He did quite well as a businessman, so little Thomas was raised quite a rich kid. He was allowed to do whatever he wanted as a child, and he decided to not to follow his dad into the same business. Well, there were some shipyards in Quebec, but I think one of them had burned, and the business wasn't doing that well anymore. So he wanted to go and study medicines. So he went to study at McGill University in Montreal, one of the best schools of medicines at the time. And at the time, you know, they would have been dissecting a lot of bodies that might have been stolen. If you followed my tours before, we spoke about the problems with body snatchers in the UK. You know, the bodies that were given to science, they were not enough. So we had some people stealing the newly buried bodies in the cemeteries to give to the anatomist for the dissections and for the students, you know, in the schools of medicines. In the UK, it pretty much stopped in 1832 when the church decided that the people that died in the workhouses or in the prisons or any of those institutions, their bodies would be given to science. In Canada, it didn't stop. It lasted a bit longer. So Thomas Neil Cream would have probably been dissecting some bodies that would have been stolen. And so sometimes the students were actually involved into stealing the bodies as well, you know. I'm not saying that Neil himself would have been stealing bodies, but he might have. Actually, there's one story I read months ago about McGill University. Apologies, I've not been able to double check it because I don't remember where I read about it. But there's one interesting story about body snatching that happened in Victorian times as well. Apparently one day there were some students that had procured a body. They body snatched it from a cemetery. And they were getting ready for the anatomy lesson. When one of the boys was late, I don't remember his name, so let's call him Jack. He was a bit late because he had had a difficult week. He had buried his aunt, and as the boys are getting ready for the dissection, Jack is on his way. One of the boys realized that they had stolen the wrong body. They had stolen Jack's aunt. They didn't know what to do because he was going to arrive and find his aunt on the operating table. Apparently the boys had only a few minutes to figure out a solution. Well, apparently they decided to skin her head. So when the boy arrived, he did not realize that he was dissecting his own auntie. So quite shocking, really. But yeah, so McGill University was a very big school of medicine. That's where Cream started to study. Eventually he left. Well, the way he left university was quite interesting because he left his lodgings and he had asked the permission to the landlady to leave some of his stuff inside for a little while. And he had a skeleton, an actual true human skeleton in his bedroom. He probably kept it from one of the anatomy lessons. And so he left the accommodation. 3 days later, there's a fire in his bedroom. Everything burned, and the skeleton was found in his bed. Of course, he claimed insurance money, but the insurance refused to pay at first because they were like, this looks a bit fishy to us. And eventually he tried to sue the insurance, so they did pay, but really nothing near the amount he wanted. And, why did he put the skeleton in his bed? Was he trying to fake his own death? Probably. At that point, he had a girlfriend, Flora. But I'll tell you about Flora in a moment. For now, let's have a look at the palace. So this is Lambeth Palace. So this is the Archbishop of Canterbury's main residence. It is a haunted building. It is allegedly haunted by a ghost that saves lives. Would you believe? Apparently there's a ghost that sometimes locks people inside one particular room, and through the Second World War it is said that one of the staff was locked into that room. He just couldn't push the gate open. And he had heard about the ghost. He was like, you know what, I'm just gonna wait until they let me out. He waited, and eventually an hour later he pushed the door and he could go. Well, it turned up that the other part of the building where he wanted to go had been bombed. So we are through. Sorry, I'm just gonna wait because those motorcycles seem to be racing. It's a bit noisy. So yeah, eventually he realized that the part of the building he was trying to access had been bombed through the Blitz. So the ghost literally saved his life. So that's a nice ghost. Hi Rose, and welcome everyone that just joined. There's another ghost. Well, some claim that it's also haunted by the ghost of Anne Boleyn. It would be here that she'd confessed to Thomas Cromwell, we know. Personally, I don't know why she would be haunting that building, because she's not been executed here or anything, but why not? Who knows? And the little graveyard, let me show you a little bit of the graveyard from here. This is no longer a consecrated church, it's now the Garden Museum. I've never been inside because I'm not a huge fan of gardening. I think it's about £15 to get in. But allegedly one of the graves is haunted as well. There's one particular grave. It is said that if you run around, so if you circle around the grave, dancing around at midnight, when Big Ben shines, the ghost comes out. It's a nice story, but the grave is from the 1700s, and Big Ben is clearly not that old. So, maybe. I think it's probably one of those little urban myths. Who knows? Can't really go at midnight anyway, because it's part of the museum. Anyway, let's get back to Thomas Neil Cream and his time in Canada. So he's, at the time when he was in university, he met a young girl. I think she was 16 at the time. She was from a wealthy family. Her name was Flora Eliza Brooks. She started an affair with Cream. She lived in Waterloo, and in Canada, not Waterloo here. A lot of the places actually mentioned tonight are actually the same in Canada. We've got London, Canada. We've got Lambeth actually in Canada, Waterloo in Canada. But yeah, so that's the same places. He lived in the same places in both sides of the Atlantic. Anyway, so yeah, he had a girlfriend, Eliza. And at some point, Eliza is very unwell. She's got a mysterious disease. And hi, Nikki, and welcome everyone that just joined. So the doctor comes and sees her, and he noticed that what she was suffering from was actually an illegal abortion. So Cream had got her pregnant, and with his knowledge of medicine, he had performed an illegal abortion on her. It worked. I mean, she didn't have the baby, but she never fully recovered. When her dad heard about that, he went ballistic. He actually grabbed a gun, and he threatened Thomas Neil Cream, because this was a criminal act, to do an illegal abortion. So Neil, kind of had to do what his father-in-law wanted him to do. So he forced him to marry her with a terrible contract that if he was to ever divorce her, he would have to give her a crazy amount of money. And Neil did it. He agreed, so they married. The next day, salut Mike, and welcome everyone. The next day, after getting married to Flora, Neil was on a boat to come down to London to finish studying at St. Thomas's Hospital. He took some lodgings around here, and he actually did not graduate from St. Thomas's. He failed. So then he went down to Edinburgh to graduate from the Royal College of Surgeons up there. So he graduated from Edinburgh, and at that point, Flora is still very unwell. So his wife in Canada, and apparently he was sending her some medicines, pills that he told her to take. And Flora died. She had a couple of wrong diagnoses. Some people believed it was tuberculosis. Flora potentially did suspect the pills because she left absolutely nothing to him in her will. At the time, they didn't have any reason to suspect him, though. I mean, he was miles away anyway. But now, knowing what's coming next in the story, it is very possible that he would have poisoned her from the distance. Ice and sun. And at that point, then he goes back to Canada to start a practice in London, Ontario. So he starts his business as a doctor. He's a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. At daytime he seems like a respectable character, but he's getting really high at night. He drinks a lot of alcohol, takes a lot of drugs, like opium and stuff like that. And quite soon after, there's a lady that is found dead meters away from his medical practice. Her name was Kitty Gardner, or Catherine Gardner. She was found on the floor. Her nose looked a bit burned by a chemical. She was holding an handkerchief, and a little bottle that smelled very strongly of chloroform was found next to the body. The police very quickly wanted to ask Cream some questions because it was just so close to his medical practice. And Cream was like, yeah, I know her, that's Kitty Gardner. She did come into my practice to ask for an abortion. Of course, I said, no, I would never do such thing. It is illegal, so I rejected her. She probably went on to take her own life. Okay, at first the pathologist kind of doubted it because of chloroform. If she did try to poison herself, well, first he believed that the handkerchief couldn't have absorbed enough of the chloroform to kill her, and also because as she breathed in, she would have fallen unconscious, so she wouldn't have the physical strength to hold the handkerchief to her nose as long as it would be needed to burn her nose that bad. So they suspected foul play, and they did suspect Cream, but they had nothing against him really. So eventually most people kind of agreed that it might have been suicide. But too many people in London, Ontario were very suspicious with Cream, so he couldn't stay because his medical practice wouldn't get enough customers, so he moved again. He moved to Chicago. In Chicago, there were a couple of very, very suspicious deaths around his medical practice. It is fairly obvious that he was doing some illegal abortions. It was big business at the time because, there was hardly any contraceptives, and there were a lot of prostitutes, of course, around that area of Chicago. And eventually there was one death that was very suspicious. Sadly, he managed to accuse his midwife, a black lady called Hattie Mack. Hi Jenny, nice to see you here. The lady was found dead in Hattie's flat, actually. It did look like they had performed an illegal abortion, but Cream claimed it wasn't him, it was Hattie, the midwife, and he had been called in to help as the abortion was already a disaster. And you know, Cream was until we're back. Right, I do apologize, I've lost you for a minute. I'm just gonna go back into what I was saying. I'm just gonna wait until you tell me that we are back in the chat. Mac, okay, cool, perfect-ish. I'll go back to that point. So yeah, Hattie Mack was the midwife. He managed to get her accused. So he managed to claim that Hattie Mack had performed the illegal abortion and that he had been called in to help, as it was already a disaster. Hattie Mack was a poor lady, a black lady. Who do you think they were gonna believe at the time, you know? So sadly, he managed to get Hattie convicted. Oh, is it buffering again? Right, let me run away from here. That's very weird areas these days. Oh, is it better, Tish? Okay, cool. So yeah, he managed to get Hattie convicted, and then there was another suspicious death. This time it was too much. He had a customer that was a gentleman, early 60s, I think 61 he was. His name was Daniel Stott. He lived in the suburbs in a little village outside of Chicago. Daniel suffered from epilepsy, and he had a very young wife that was a very pretty wife. That wife usually came to collect his medicine from Cream, and one day Daniel died. He took his pills and he started to have some kind of convulsions and he died. They didn't think anything was suspicious, you know. They buried him and that was it. The man was 61. He suffered from epilepsy. They buried him. But Cream was not satisfied with the idea of getting away with murder. So would you believe, Cream then wrote a letter to the coroner. He asked them to unbury, to get the body out. He says that Stott had been poisoned, obviously poisoned, with strychnine. They had to exhume the body and test for strychnine. The coroner was like, no, there's nothing suspicious about that death. Cream insisted. He wrote again. He was like, I'm telling you, he's been poisoned. He claimed that he was told by a medium, a psychic that came to his medical practice. And eventually the coroner was like, well, okay. Because Cream was like, you know what, get the medicine and give it to the dog, see what happens. So that's what the coroner did. Of course, the dog died. And that time, I mean, Cream had really incriminated himself quite badly. Of course, they exhumed the body. They found traces of strychnine poisoning. Then he started to blame the pharmacist. He actually wrote to the pharmacist saying, I know you've done it. I'm gonna try to help you, but you know, it's clearly your medicine. Because you know, at the time, the pharmacists, they would actually they'll mix the medicine themselves, you know. And eventually it turned out that he was having an affair with the wife, the victim's wife. And eventually it was a bit much. He had completely incriminated himself. Yeah, no, poor dog, completely innocent. And Cream was he was convicted of murder. He was sent to Joliet prison in Illinois. Usually, I mean, those type of crime, he could have been hanged. But no, he was sent to life prison. I mean, to prison for life, officially. Sadly not. he was released about 9 years later. His family might have bribed a bit the governor and stuff, because usually, but they managed to still claim a bit of doubt, and he was released. By the way, this beautiful building there, well, beautiful now, this interesting building, it is the forensics police. So yeah, every time I walk or cycle past, I always wonder what interesting cases they might be working on inside. And anyway, he's released from Joliet prison. At the time, all they would have done to him was they would have done what we called Bertillonnage. Bertillonnage after Adolphe Bertillon. That is the guy that invented the mugshots. But you know, at the time, the mugshots, they were classified with names. Often on a mugshot, they'll put their fingers as well, because a lot of people would lose fingers, you know, in factory accidents and stuff. But the mugshots were classified by names, and it was so easy to change your name at the time. So what they used to do as well is Bertillonnage. So they would take the measurement, 11 measurements of different parts of your body. It might be the forearm, it might be the diameter of the skull, whatever, 11 measurements, and those would be classified by measurements. So it was much easier to find out, to recognize the criminals, you know, if they were convicted again or caught again, because it's very unlikely that people would have 11 measurements that are exactly the same. So that's what they would have done to him before to release him. And then free he was. He went back towards his family, but his family was really concerned. His dad had died by now, but his brother was very concerned about his mental health. So they sent him to London, like if it was going to help. But at least he was away from them. That was the main issue. So he moved into London, and he took a lodging here in his old stomping grounds in Lambeth. He took a lodging at number 103 Lambeth Palace Road. It's right next to St. Thomas's Hospital. And well, very quickly after, ladies started to drop dead. The first one was a young girl called Ellen Dunworth. She had a sad life. She'd fallen pregnant very early as well. I think she was 16. And you know, she would have been kicked out from her family. So she moved to London with her boyfriend. She took a job in a factory. She was sticking labels on bottles. But the baby died. And eventually she found herself in prostitution. And her boyfriend was actually living on the proceeds of that prostitution. One night she was across in the other side in Waterloo, in front of a pub. Let me show you the pub. We've seen it last week, the Wellington. She was stood in front of a pub, waiting for customers probably, when she suddenly fell down and her body was convulsing. So everyone started to run towards her to help. And let me remove the photo. And she was in a terrible state. Her body was shaking and her muscles were contracting. And she said to the police constable, she says, "It's Fred, it's Fred. I've taken a drink." No, she didn't say Fred, sorry. She said, "It's the tall man with the cross eye." The next victim said Fred. She said, "It's a tall man with a top hat and crossed eye, given me a drink." And they took her in a hackney cab to go towards St. Thomas's Hospital. She was like, "No, let me die at home." And she died in the horse carriage anyway, before she could even get to hospital. Now, the police, they did investigate a man with a cross eye, you know. The police did not completely drop the case. They had someone arrested. There was a guy bragging about murder and poisons in King's Cross, in a pub. He was arrested, but he was quickly found innocent. And that was it, really. The police did not completely drop it, but most of them were convinced she had taken the poison herself. But how would she have found strychnine? Strychnine is a poison that was It was used in medicines at the time, in some medicines in a small quantity, but you couldn't buy it on your, you didn't need a prescription and it would be very, very small quantities, or it was for doctors. So how would little Ellen have found, have bought the poison herself, Anyway, very quickly after, just a couple of weeks later, there was a couple of sex workers, 2 young girls again, that had, Cream had invited himself, at least Fred, they knew him as Fred. He had invited himself he had hired the 2 of them for a few hours in a building that would have been somewhere there. They've completely changed today, but he had the beginning of Hercules Street. Hercules Street, you might have heard of it because William Blake used to live here, the poet and painter. And anyway, they were waiting for Fred when they looked over the window and they saw Fred. Is there an issue with my mic connection? Hold on, I'm gonna tap the microphone 3 times. You tell me if you hear it properly, okay? Sorry. 1. Did you hear the tapping? You should have heard 3 taps. If not, there might be a problem with my mic. I can fix that. Let me know. Let me know if you've heard the tapping. There was a buzzing. Okay, let me just. I'm just gonna replug it just in. Right, let's do it again. It's telling me it's connected, but 1. Right, did you hear the tapping properly this time? Not buzzing now, cool. Okay, cool, so I'm gonna consider it to be good. Well, I've just replugged the microphone. The buzzing is back. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, bear with me 1 sec. I'm just gonna... Now I've completely unplugged the microphone. Can you hear the buzzing now? It's good. I'm just gonna plug it back on again, but I have no idea what it could be. I mean, we had a train of our we're not talking about the train, are we? Because there was a train above us. Okay, I'm gonna put the microphone back on. Is there any buzzing now? Let me know if you hear the buzzing. And let's keep going anyway. So if the buzzing comes back, do let me know, but I don't know how it's happening. Right, so those 2 sex workers are up there somewhere. They're waiting for a guy called Fred with a top hat and a cross eye. Let me show you a picture of Fred, actually. This is our man. This is, we know now this is Thomas Neil Cream. So they're waiting for Fred when they spotted Fred on the street with another sex worker here, Matilda Clover. Is it buffering? I'm sorry guys, I have no idea what's happening today. Right, let's make a move. So, well, I don't know what to do, guys, because I'll just keep going. I do apologize about the sound. So yeah, their spot Fred is going towards those buildings there with another sex worker, Matilda Clover. She's 27 years old. She lives up there with a child, and she had her face had been ravaged by smallpox, and so the two sex workers were like, what? He's booked us, and then he goes with another. So those were interesting witnesses. Let's go, because there's no traffic anyway. Matilda, she lived with a maid. She actually lived with another lady, and that lady had a maid called Lucy Rose. So Matilda was, at the time it was a very different building on this side. It probably would have looked a bit more like the buildings on the other side. The maid, she witnessed the guy coming in. So a customer came in. Matilda went down to the pub. I'll show you the pub in a moment. She went down to get some drinks at the pub. And because, at the time, nowadays we go down to the shop, but often you'd go to the pub to buy some beers or wine, and you could take it away if you wanted to. Then she comes back. They spent a bit of time together. And apparently, Matilda told Lucy Rose that the man was a doctor, and he had given her 3 pills, elongated pills, to prevent her from catching the disease. We are clearly talking about venereal disease. Sex workers at the time were paranoid about catching the disease because 20% of the population had syphilis, And then that's it. The gentleman, the customer was gone, and suddenly Matilda Clover started to suffer from some very, very violent convulsions. Her body was shaking and all her muscles were contracting. Strychnine poisoning is a terrible, terrible way to go. You're conscious until the very last moment, but your body is in a terrible state, and then eventually your organs shut down. They called in a doctor, but the doctor was busy, so he actually sent his apprentice. The apprentice turned up, but he says, yeah, she's dying of alcohol poisoning. This is like an epileptic fit due to alcohol poisoning. She doesn't have long to live. I'll try to come back with some medicine, but she's gonna die anyway. Bye. She did die very, very quickly after, 2 hours later. The actual doctor did not come until the next morning for the death certificate. And he did not really examine the body again. He just went down with the conclusions of his colleague, his apprentice. So he put it down as alcohol poisoning. And the maid, Lucy Rose, she did try to tell them, no, but she's taken some pills from a doctor for her not to catch the disease. It's the pills, and she was ignored. They put it down as alcohol poisoning. She was buried in Tooting Cemetery, and that was it really. Matilda Clover was no more, and the coroner didn't know, no one knew, because no one saw anything suspicious with that death yet. So this is the pub over here. It used to be called the Mason Arms at the time. Now it's the Lambeth Walk. It's no longer a pub anymore anyway, but that's where she had come down to buy the drinks. To go back up there at number 27 Lambeth Road. That's where she used to live. Now there was what is wrong with the trees? No leaves. Well, some of them have started to fall down already. It's not even autumn yet, but anyway. So there was another victim, a very interesting victim because she's alive. There was a lady called Lou Harvey that also met a guy called Fred. He took her for a night out, he took her to a hotel, they did what they had to do. And the next morning, he paid her £3. That was a huge amount of money at the time for a Victorian street worker. That would have been like a week of salary. So he was a very generous customer. And that morning, he said to her, "Can I meet you again tonight? Let's meet on the embankment. Oh, by the way, you've got a spot on your forehead. I'll give you a pill for your complexion." Okay. So she came to the meeting. She was a little bit suspicious with that very generous customer. She had actually told her brother to follow her. And she met him on the embankment. He did give her those long pills, but she managed to pretend that she had taken them, and then she actually dropped them in the river behind her. And then he pretended he had somewhere to go. He had to run to St. Thomas's Hospital. So he said to her, "You go to the theater, I'll meet you after." He never turned up because he believed she was dead. He was convinced he had poisoned her. Let me show you a statue here. That's quite weird. It's a church, so I guess it represents some kind of charity, but it's just a bit weird. Anyway, Lou Harvey very much survived, but he was convinced she was dead. She's gonna be the beginning of his downfall, actually. At that point, he ran out of money, so he went back to Canada to catch the second part of his inheritance. On board, on the ship, going back to Canada, he actually met a police officer, would you believe? And he was talking about poisons and murders, and he said he had some information about some murders in London. They became friends, but the police officer actually didn't take the guy seriously. Krim was always very high on opium and stuff, so he just believed the guy had some mental health issues. He didn't take any of it seriously. And then eventually he comes back to London with more money. And at that point, that's when a lot of people started to receive letters. Very strange letters. They were blackmails, really. The first one to receive a letter was actually William Frederick Smith, the son of W.H. Smith, the stationery or the bookshop mainly in the train stations. So William Fred Smith was his heir, and he was a member of Parliament. He received a letter stating that they knew he had been involved in the poisoning of a lady called Ellen Dornworth. He'll have to give them so much money, otherwise they'll go to the police with their information. Now, William Frederick Smith, he had nothing against him, he'd done nothing wrong. So he decided to show the letter to the police. The police did try to set up a trap to catch the blackmailer, but the guy didn't turn up for the money, and that was it, really. Then there was another Smith, Magistrate Smith, that received a letter that claimed the same, that William Frederick Smith had been involved in a poisoning. The magistrate actually ignored it. He believed it was a hoax. He didn't do anything about it. And then there was another gentleman, a physician, William Broadbent. He was the physician of Queen Victoria, actually. And he received a letter claiming that he had been involved into the poisoning of a Matilda Clover. And the physician knew nothing about it. He gave the letter to the police, but that was it. Oh, thank you, Linda. That's very, very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And so all those letters ended up with the police, but different police stations anyway, and they were not connected yet. Krim did make a mistake there, linking the two murders, because at that time, no one knew that a Matilda Clover had been murdered. And eventually, there's another lady, Countess Russell. She also received a letter. She was going through a dirty divorce, and she received a letter claiming that her husband had been involved in the poisoning of a Matilda Clover at number 27 South Lambeth Road. She was interested because if indeed there was a bit of a dirty story there, because she was going through a divorce, that could help her. So she sent some of her staff ringing the door at number 27 South Lambeth Road, and they asked if there was any Matilda Clover that had been murdered. They said, no, we don't know of a Matilda Clover that's been murdered. It's because Scream had made a mistake in the letter. It was not number 27 South Lambeth Road, but number 27 Lambeth Road. That was it. So that's why the letters were not really caught by the police yet. And at that point, one night, there was a police constable that was walking around Stamford Street. It's in Waterloo. It's just minutes away from here, but we're not going to go because we were already done that last week. The police constable is walking. There were a lot of prostitutes in that area. Prostitution was almost as... There were almost as many prostitutes here than there were in Whitechapel, really. At the time, Lambeth could rival Whitechapel in terms of vice and all that. Actually, Waterloo used to be referred to as Horaloo at the time. So the police officer noticed a gentleman coming out of a lodging at number 118. He noticed a guy that looked a little bit too posh for the area, really. He was wearing a silk top hat, and he had some gold rim glasses. And the police constable just noticed him, and he kept going on his beat. When he walks back up the same way 45 minutes later, when he notices one of his colleagues, another police constable, running out of the same building with a lady on his back. She's convulsing, her body is contracting from everywhere. And the police officer says to his colleague, there's another one inside, go in. So the police constable went inside to find the second girl. So those two ladies were Alice Smash and Emma Shrivel. They were, I think, 17 and 20 years old. They had come up from Brighton, and they had started a life in the sex trade. The both of them had been booked for a night with a gentleman called Fred. So one of them was still alive. So she still had time, a few minutes at least, to speak to the police officer. She says it's Fred. He's given us some pills to avoid catching the disease. We've got a letter from Fred upstairs in the room. You can go and get the letter. And the police officer was like, was that the man I spotted 45 minutes ago coming out? A tall man with a top hat and gold rim glasses. And Emma said, yes, that's him, that's Fred. And then she died as well. So the two young girls were dead, sadly. Now at the time, they had eaten some canned salmon through the evening, and at the time they were actually not sure whether it was a poisoning, a voluntary poisoning, or if it might have just been food poisoning. There had been some cases of food poisonings happening because of canned fish. Even the army, they had to, the Navy, they stopped giving them some canned earrings because that could happen. Hi, Pisas. Guys, is the sound any better now, or is it still buzzing in the background? Do let me know. I'll keep going anyway, but it's just good to know. And so they did the analysis on the semen. It was absolutely fine. Then they found strychnine in their bodies. And then the police constable that had spotted Fred, he made it his mission to find the guy. Every night he walked around the West End of London to, around the theatres and stuff, or those places where they might have gentlemen looking for prostitutes. He made it his mission to find him, and eventually one night he did. He recognized him. He followed him. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Tish. That's a great relief. He followed him home to his lodging at number 103 Lambeth Palace Road. And then they started to shadow him. They started to follow him around. And then the police received a formal complaint from a guy that was a former police officer. He claimed that his friend, Thomas Neil Cream, was being harassed by the police. The police was actually quite smart on that one. They were like, okay. They sent a police officer to contact Cream to allegedly investigate the harassment investigation. So that police officer became friend with Cream, and Cream was chatting a lot about murder, about those victims. He knew everything about the case, and he kept talking about a Matilda Clover that had been murdered. The police didn't know about a Matilda Clover yet, and a Louisa Harvey. The police didn't know about a Louisa Harvey that had been murdered. And eventually, the little maid, Lucy Rose, she went back to the police because she read in the newspaper about those cases of murders with elongated pills. And she told them that former lodger, Matilda Clover, had been mysteriously died, and she suspected murder because she had been meeting up with a friend that gave her some long pills. So then the police decided to exhume Matilda Clover's body. She had been buried in a pauper's grave, so she had 14 other caskets on top of her. And of course, when they exhumed the body, she was also poisoned. Her body was quite well preserved. That's the thing with some of those poisons, they actually preserve the body. So they found traces of strychnine. The police then they were convinced they had their men. And actually, Cream had given them, when he was a bit too chatty with his mate, the police officer, he'd given them a sample of his handwriting. So they actually had enough to take him down for blackmail, but not murder yet. So the police decided to arrest him on the charges of blackmail anyway. They knew it was his handwriting, they knew it has to be him. He then started to accuse one of his former housemaids to have committed the murders, and that's why he knew so much, but that didn't really stack up. But the really piece of information that helped the police convict him, it's that there was a lady called Lou Harvey from Brighton. She had moved into Brighton. She read the newspaper that there was a murder in London or a killer that kept poisoning prostitutes with elongated pills. And well, I was like, could that be my man? I've had those long pills and I've thrown them into the river. The next day, she reads the newspaper again, and she read about a Louisa Harvey that had been murdered. She was like, that must be me, and I'm not murdered at all. So she contacted the police, and she actually turned up at the trial. Apparently, when Cream saw her, he went white, like if he had seen a ghost, because he was convinced he had killed her. And eventually they had enough. They convicted him of murder. Only the Emma Shrivel and Maud Marsh, but that was enough. That was enough for, one murder at the time was enough to be sent to the gallows anyway. So he was sent to Newgate prison and he was hanged. Now, it is said that when he went down to the gallows, at the moment of the execution, it is said that he would have said, "I am Jack." So some people have used that to mean that he might have been Jack the Ripper. He would have meant, "I am Jack the Ripper." It's a nice story, but first, the story only came out 10 years after, so it might be a hoax. And also, the story of the hanging, and also, it's not possible. At the time of the Ripper murders in 1888, he would have been in Joliet prison. He was locked up. He could not have been in the streets of Whitechapel. Not possible. Some say that he might have had a dead ringer or a twin brother, and he might have sent them to the prison, and then he would have been. Nah, it's just not possible. Some say that he never meant to say, "I'm Jack the Ripper," but he might have said, "I am jaculated." that he might have wanted to say, I am ejaculating. It is possible. Apparently, it does happen sometimes when you hang. So, you know, who knows? We'll never know. Anyway, that was the story of Thomas Neil Cream for you. So another horrible Victorian serial killer. Now, I do hope he's not Jack the Ripper. I mean, I'm sure he's not, but because he's actually buried now right next to three of his victims, actually. Polly Nichols, Catherine Eddowes, and Annie Chapman. The three of them are buried in the City of London Cemetery. Well, and Manor Park Cemetery. That's where his remains were moved to. He was first buried on the grounds of Newgate Prison, but when they closed, they moved the bodies. Hi, Tanya, and welcome everyone that just joined. Now, let's look at this beautiful building. This is now the Imperial War Museum. It is a beautiful museum, mainly about World War II. It is free to access, so if you do come to London, it's quite a cool place to visit. But it's got a bit of dark history, because this was not always a museum. This used to be the site of Bedlam Hospital. Bedlam Hospital was probably the most infamous psychiatric institution ever. You might have heard the expression when we say it's Bedlam in here, that means it's chaotic. It's the hospital, well, technically it started as a priory in the 13th century. They have had quite a few different locations over the years. The worst one was actually, well, it was a beautiful building in Moorgate. It was sometimes compared to Versailles. The institution was run as a charity. And the guy running it, the governor, he was from high society and stuff. And we know now that a lot of the charity money went straight into his pockets. Inside of Bedlam Hospital at the time, it was a nightmare. They did not have any inspections well, the first inspection was in 1814, when they realized how bad it was inside. You know, because the guy was from high society and stuff, they kind of just trusted him. Big mistake. It was horrendous in there. They used to have, I mean, they would lock people up. They'll be on the floor naked in their feces. And you'd have some visitors as well. You could come and see what, apologies for the term, but what they would have called the mads. And that was like if they were going to the zoo. Actually, Samuel Pepys, you know, the famous diarist, there's an entry in his diary where he says, oh, my little cousin is coming to visit London. I might take him to Bedlam. Like if he was talking about the London Zoo or the Tower of London, or, well, technically the Tower of London and the London Zoo, that was the same thing at that time, because the animals were at the tower. But anyway, like if he was going to any London touristy attraction, really. Well, some people might argue that actually to have those visitors, even if they were treated like animals or curiosities or object of ridicule, actually that gave them some form of contact with the outside world, you know. Some people argued it might not have been that bad. Well, even when the hospital moved here, even Charles Dickens used to visit, you know. Yeah, the one in Moorgate, that was horrible. They had an apothecary, John Wright, his name was. He used to hang around the ladies' wing at night. He was a bit dodgy. Well, apparently, when they died, he used to dissect their brains. So it was a bit like Frankenstein down there. I mean, it was just horrible. There were a few famous or infamous patients. The most famous one was Margaret Nicholson. It was the inspiration for the asylum in Dracula, Mark is saying. Yeah, that's probably the case. I didn't know, but yeah. The most famous resident might be Margaret Nicholson. She was the lady that was, she had tried George III. she famously came in front of the palace with a knife and she tried to kill the king. And the king very famously said, because obviously the guards got her, and he said, "Do not hurt her. This woman is mad." Which is quite sweet because, I mean, we know now that a few years later, George III himself ended up having some very strong mental health issues. So it's nice to know that he was always a little bit protective with people with this type of conditions anyway. But Margaret became very infamous. Everyone wanted to go down to Bedlam to see Margaret Nicholson. Some of the pubs across the street from the hospital, some of them claimed that they had the fork. You know, the fork that went with the knife that Margaret tried to use to kill the king. And there was another chap that was quite scandalous as well. His name was James Norris. He was an American sailor. He had been locked into Bedlam. To be fair, when he was first locked up, he might have had some kind of mental struggles, but when they did the first inspection in 1814, they found him there on the floor in his feces and freezing cold, and he was absolutely fine. He was completely coherent. He did not have any mental health issues whatsoever anymore. So they didn't even check up on their patients, you know. So yeah, it was a terrible. It was already much better. And it still exists. It's not Bedlam, it's Bethlehem Hospital. It's been shortened into Bedlam. It still exists today. It's in Eltham today. And today it's a very respectable institution. So although it's got a lot of dark history today, it's absolutely fine. Yes, I know, Tish. I didn't want to highlight it because it's a bad guy. But yeah, John Wright, like our John Wright. For the ones that don't know, John Wright is my friend in York that does some virtual tours as well on YouTube. But yeah, same name. Well, John Wright was also. There was also a John Wright that was one of the guys that tried to blow off Parliament, you know, with the Guy Fawkes conspiracy. So there's been a lot of naughty John Wrights in history. Anyway, now time to tell you about another naughty man. A genius in his line of work, but a quite naughty gentleman. Some of you might know who I'm talking about, Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin lived around here. He was a London boy. People tend to forget, you know, sometimes people think he was American, but no, he was very much a London boy. And he had a childhood, a bit like Oliver Twist childhood, really. He was taken to the workhouse and stuff. I'll show you the workhouse actually in a moment. So I'll show you where he was taken. And let's talk about his life as a child first. Then we'll come to the dodgy side of his love life. But luckily, I didn't frame that. Anyway, let me take you to West Square. There's a gentleman that pulled his trousers down, but he knew he wasn't on camera because I was filming the other side. It's a shame because I always try to avoid people, you know, when I'm filming, but sometimes it would actually be funnier if I did frame them. Anyway, back to Charlie Chaplin. His dad was an actor. His dad was also called Charles Chaplin, and his mother Anna, she was a singer. And what happened is his dad went to America to try to make a career into acting. I think it was a year, so not too long. But when he came back, Anna had a child. One day, we think she's singing, and she's singing, and she had a bit of a mental health episode. Come back eventually. Okay, I think we're back. Cool. I'm getting all the chat now. Yes, Natasha. I think he had some kind of an underwear anyway. Didn't anyway. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I do apologize. I'm not sure what you've heard, so I'm just gonna tell you again because we've lost the signal for a bit. Which door am I looking at? Yes, I think it's this one. So it is this one, this house here, where we believe Charlie might have lived as a child, number 39 West Square. There was also another interesting story here on West Square. There was a very sad murder on the other side of the square. The square has been built at the very beginning of the 19th century. Well, actually, they started late 18th century and it was finished in the very early 19th century. And at that point, at some point in Victorian times, there was a guy that lived on the other side. He was, he was some kind of a street performer, and he had a seal that he called his sea dog, and he was performing with the seal on the streets. So he was basically abusing the animal to make money. But you know, people at the time didn't really see it that way. He had a wife, Mary. And one day she left him. She'd met another guy, William. She left him. And apparently one day she saw him, so her ex, she saw him on the street performing with his seal. And she was like, oh, I'm actually still so in love with him. So she went back with her husband. And she dropped the other guy, the other William. And one day the William is walking down here when he sees the husband walking out with his seal. So he now had the address. He went straight in and he actually killed Mary and himself. So very sad. And then the husband, when he heard, of course, he actually tried to drown himself. The seal was rescued. But yeah, very sad story. And anyway, we'll go back to Charlie. I'll tell you again what you might have missed. So we were talking about Charlie being a boy. His dad had pretty much abandoned them. Charlie is living with his mom and his brother Sydney. They are struggling a bit. They don't have much money. So his mother is a singer. And one night she's on stage and her voice cracked. She then had some kind of a breakdown. And apparently the producer of the show looks at Charlie and is like, you boy, you get on. I don't care what you do, but you just get on stage and you entertain them, okay? So little Charlie, probably 6 years old, jumped on stage and he actually entertained them very well indeed. He started to kind of imitate his mum with the voice cracking and stuff, and then he sung and he danced, and that worked very well for him. Apparently that was the beginning of his career. After that he started a sketch group with his brother, and then he was in a play about Sherlock Holmes and stuff. So that was the beginning of his career. Now let me show you that interesting thing here. Some of you might remember, because a lot of you have followed that tour before. But this is actually a scratching post for the horses, so they could come and scratch their backs or their sides on this thing. So that's cool that we still have it today. Anyway, back to Charlie. So after that, yeah, his career started, and that's when he moved to America, and then he became one of the most. I mean, he became the most well-paid actor ever. I mean, when he moved to Hollywood is just a little village. It's only about 10 years old, really. So it was the beginning of all that movie business, you know. Chaplin was born. He's born 4 days before Adolf Hitler. I think it's 1889 that he was born. And so yeah, he moves to America. Actually, Hitler was a great fan of Charlie Chaplin. It is said, it's debatable, but it is said that Adolf Hitler copied his little mustache from Chaplin. And And yeah, I only know that they were born 4 days apart because I sadly share a birthday with Adolf Hitler, 20th of April. Anyway, so Charlie, great actor and producer, I mean, great movie maker, really. And I think that some of those movies, we can still somehow find them relatable today because there's no talking. It's a bit like Mr. Bean, you know, it still makes us laugh today, probably because of the absence of dialogues, really. So yeah, great artist, of course. But his love life? Not really. But I'll tell you about that in a moment. For now, let me show you this little building here that you might recognize from a video clip that was filmed in 1982. I'm sure some of you remember. It looks very different. I'll show you the picture. Do we know what video clip I'm talking about? It's just a date. Yeah, thank you. You don't like Mr. Bean, Lynn? So it's from the Dixie Midnight Runners. Do we remember? Exactly, it's Come On Aileen. Come on Aileen. I can't think. I don't even know the lyrics, you know what? But yeah, that's where they filmed the video clip in the early 80s. Now let's move this photo. And let's get back to Charlie. So yeah, Charlie's love life. Let's say he liked his girls young. And when I say girls, I mean girls. His first wife, Mildred Harris, her name was. She was, I think, 15 when they met. And then when she was 16, she told him she got pregnant. So he actually had to marry her. And then as they had got married, she told him no, she wasn't pregnant. So he went ballistic, but actually by then she had got pregnant and the baby died. He divorced her a few days later. I mean, he had no compassion whatsoever. So that was only the first one. He had 4 in total. The second one, it's probably the most, her name was Lita Gray, or Lilita was her actual name. She actually inspired Lolita, you know, the novel in the 50s, I think it was. Lita Gray, she was cast, well, she actually met Charlie when she was 8. Hopefully nothing happened then, but at the age of 12, he cast her in his movie. She played the flirting angel, the flirtatious angel, I think, I think that's in the Kid movie. She looks a little bit older on those scenes because she's full of makeup, but she is 12 years old. Yes, exactly, Tish, the novel from Nabokov, Lolita. And yeah, so she's very young. And actually, even on the movie set, apparently people could see that he was grooming her, and he was telling them, "No, don't worry. If she falls pregnant, I'll marry her." They didn't, or at least we don't think they started a relationship quite then. But when she was 15, they did definitely get together, and she got pregnant. Lita's mum went ballistic, and she was like, "Now you marry her, or I'll expose you, and I'll get your career ruined." Because it's not that it was different at the time. It wasn't. The age of consent in most of the states was 16. So he actually took her down to Mexico to marry her there. There's one story, take this information with a pinch of salt, because Lita Gray, she's actually published 2 biographies, and one of them, she later claimed that her editor had added some crispy details. And I've not read the book, so I don't know which book the story is coming from. But there's a story when apparently they're coming back from Mexico and there's a train passing by, and he was like, oh, maybe you should unalive yourself. So yeah, horrible man. And then she's then 16 and he's trying to push her into group sex and some sexual stuff that were actually illegal in America in the 1920s. And he's telling her, oh, everyone does it, you know, all married couple do it, you know, but she's 16 and very innocent, poor little Lita. And she actually ends up divorcing him. She started to leak some stories to the press, and eventually she got a huge divorce settlement. That was the largest divorce settlement in America at the time, because they wanted to shush her up. I want to say about 9 million in today's money, but I don't know for sure, because every time I try to Google it, I find different figures. Some people said 16 million US dollars. Anyway, this tower here was once part of the workhouse. I'll show you the front of the workhouse. So this is the Lambeth Union workhouse. When we say union, it's because of the union of parishes. You know, at the time you had all those little parishes. This is where Polly Nichols, you know, the first of the canonical 5 Ripper victims, spent a bit of time as well. I think she spent 11 months in here, Polly. Yes, exactly. Not a nice person, but a very good actor indeed. Yeah, very, very talented guy. I mean, I guess no one can say anything against that. So that's the second wife, Lita. She's actually the only wife he does not mention at all in his autobiography. I wonder why. The third wife, her name was Pauline Goddard. He also cast her into a movie. He cast her in the movie The Dictator. The movie The Dictator, really, that's when people in the US started to question his motivations, let's say. Because he was mocking Hitler, yeah, but that was just before the US got into the war. And after that, he got pretty much expelled from the US anyway. But yeah, Pauline, well, she was 22, I think, when they married, but she had told him she was 17. She knew he liked them young. She actually divorced him. And the last one, Una Chaplin, I think she was 18 when she married him, but at that point he was 52. So he did, you know, there's nothing illegal there, but he did like his huge age gaps. And they spent the rest of their life together. So they'd moved to Switzerland and they had many children. Actually, they had one granddaughter that is also called Una Chaplin, that you might know if you happen to be a fan of Game of Thrones. Talisa Stark she plays. So this is Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter there in Game of Thrones. Right, cool. So this is the main entrance of the workhouse. So this is the very workhouse in which Charlie spent a bit of time as a child. Now, if you followed my tours before, we talked about those workhouses in the past. They were horrible institutions for the poor. If really you could not feed your kids, you couldn't put a roof over your head, the very last resort was to come to the workhouse. They were all bad, but the Lambeth Union workhouse was one of the worst. The mortality rate was terrible. Apparently there was a lack of water and a lot of kids died, and it was quite bad. The kids, if you were over 7 years of age, you were separated from your mum. So Charlie was not even in the same wing as his mother. He did not spend too much time in there. I think that he was sent to a school outside of London. His mother, some of you might know, she sadly descended into very strong mental health issues. she was taken to quite a posh asylum in California. He actually paid for his mother, I think. But yeah, quite a difficult childhood. Maybe that's why he became such a horrible. According to some, I think it's Marlon Brando that said he was the most sadistic person he's ever met. But you know, maybe he had a lot of traumas in his childhood as well. Now, this is not the end of the story. So they moved to Switzerland, they had many kids, and they lived happy ever after. But when he died, I think he was 88 years of age, he died in 77. He is buried in Lausanne, well, not in Lausanne, in a little village close to Lausanne. I think it's called Crozier. He's buried. He died at Christmas, 77. And in March, Una, so his widow, she receives a phone call from a Monsieur Rochard. Monsieur Rochard had a very strong Polish accent, so he might not have been a Monsieur Rochard. And he said to Una, "I've body snatched your husband. If you want to see him again, you need to give me 600,000 francs." Now, apparently, Una Chaplin, she was like, yeah, right. She found it hilarious. She was like, Charlie would have found it ridiculous. I'm not giving you that amount of money. She started to negotiate the amount. Of course, she involved the police. They first tried to set up a trap, but that didn't work. Then what they had to do is they eventually started to monitor every single every single phone box in and around Lausanne, because the criminals, there were two of them, one Polish and one from Bulgaria. They were car mechanics. They were struggling for money. They actually used different telephones each time, but eventually the police was able to locate them. And they were caught, so they had to give the location of the body, but they didn't remember, because apparently their original plan was not to steal the body and take it away. They wanted to unbury Chaplin, dig much deeper, rebury him in the same grave but much deeper. So then once they got the ransom, they could say, oh, he's still there, he's just a bit deeper. But that didn't work. Apparently they couldn't dig any deeper. So that's why they had buried him a few miles away. But apparently they didn't remember the exact spot. So the police had to go with metal detectors to eventually be able to catch the handles of the coffin. So eventually they did find Charlie. It was quite hard to recognize him because the coffin was full of water, but it was indeed Charlie. So they reburied him. They reburied him in the very same grave, but they dropped a layer of concrete to make sure no one could body snatch him again. So that's the end of the story of Charlie Chaplin. And that's going to be the end of the tour as well. Let me catch up with Natasha. Yes, exactly, Natasha. He had already had, so he died of a heart attack, but he was already in a wheelchair. So yeah, I think she nursed him a lot. Yeah. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. Let me know in the chat if you have any questions for me before we go. If not, thank you very much for coming today. If you want to see a bit more of me, next, 4th of August, I'm taking you for a walk on the South Bank, where we'll see the Tower Bridge lift up. And I do hope the gods of the internet will be with me this time, and the gods of the microphone connections. I have no idea what happened today, but hopefully that didn't disturb too much. Thanks, Tish. Thanks, Laurie. Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, everyone, for... Let me show you. This looks like a former pub. Look, it's probably been converted into apartments, but look. The Kurt Tavern, it says. It's quite typical of those Victorian pubs, you know, the top there. Thanks, Ronnie. Thanks, Tanya. If any of you dropped me a little tip on Buy Me a Coffee or on PayPal, that's very, very much appreciated as well. I really completely rely on your generosity, you know, so it's always every little helps. No, I've not seen Zodiac, Natasha. I've been told I should watch it, but I've not seen it. Thank you, Mike. Cool. So I'll see most of you on the 4th, I hope, and I'll start doing more scheduling for August as well. I need to take you back to Tower Hamlet Cemetery as well. It's been a while, and I do want to take you to Stockwell as well, but that's a lot of research and might wait until September when maybe I have a bit more time, because it's been very busy this day with work, so it's quite difficult to keep up with research and all that. It came out in 2007. Yeah, I've been told I should watch it. Anyway, thank you guys. If any of you were completely new to me, if you've made it that long into the live stream, you probably want to subscribe, because this way you'll be able to get a little notification when I go live, because it's very easy to miss those lives. You can always watch the replay, of course, but it's so much more fun to be in the chat and to be able to interact with me or with each other as well. So do make sure you subscribe, and also, if you put a little thumbs up, that always helps, you know, with the algorithms and stuff. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you all on the 4th. Have a great evening, a great morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And I'm off to bed. I'm gonna cycle home and go straight to bed. Bye bye. Have a good one. Uh-oh. There we go. Bye.